girl is found dead in her own basement on the day after Christmas in a house where every door was locked from the inside. There's a ransom note, but the person she was supposedly kidnapped for was already dead in the house the whole time. The note is nearly 3 pages long, written with a pen and paper from inside the home, and demands almost the exact amount of money her father had just received as a bonus. I know how that sounds, like a plot somebody made up. But this really happened in Boulder, Colorado, in 1996. And 30 years later, nobody has ever been charged. Not one person. Let me back up and tell you how we got there. Before she was a headline, she was JonBenét Ramsey, 6 years old, kindergartner, the kind of kid who did cartwheels in the yard and belted out songs like she was performing for a stadium instead of her living room. She competed in children's pageants. You've probably seen the photos, the big hair, the makeup, the sequins, and that image is honestly most of what people remember of her. But her family and teachers described a kid who was also just a kid. She liked being silly. She had a brother, Burke, a few years older, and parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, who by every account doted on both of their children. John ran a successful tech company. Patsy had been a former Miss West Virginia. They were, from the outside, a picture-perfect family in a wealthy Boulder neighborhood. I want to sit with that for a second, because it matters later. Everything about this family looked safe, looked normal. And that contrast, the ordinary Christmas, the ordinary house, is what makes what happened next so hard to process. December 25th, 1996. The Ramseys hosted a Christmas party, came home, put the kids to bed. Nothing about the night, from what's known, stood out as unusual. Then, early the next morning, Patsy says she went downstairs and found a note on the staircase, handwritten, addressed to John. It claimed a small foreign faction had JonBenét demanded $118,000 and warned the family not to call police. Patsy called 911 anyway. You can still hear that call. It's public record, and it's chaotic, panicked, the kind of call where you can hear a family unraveling in real time. Police arrived. And here's where I need to just stop and point something out because it's one of the most infuriating parts of this whole case. The initial investigation was, by later admission of the Boulder Police Department itself, badly mishandled. Friends and family were allowed to wander through the house. Nobody sealed the scene properly. Evidence was potentially contaminated before anyone even understood they were investigating a homicide rather than a kidnapping. Because for hours, that's what everyone believed this was, a kidnapping. Officers waited for a phone call that, according to the note, was supposed to come. It never did. Then, in the early afternoon, a family friend named Fleet White was asked to search the house again with John. They went down to a small basement room, used partly as storage, and that's where John found his daughter's body, wrapped in a blanket. I'm not going to walk you through crime scene detail for shock value. That's not why I'm telling you this. But investigators later confirmed she had died from strangulation, with a garrote fashioned from cord and a broken paintbrush handle, and that she also had a skull fracture. The autopsy additionally noted evidence of both acute injury and signs some medical experts interpreted as consistent with prior trauma, though that second finding has been disputed and debated by different experts for decades, and I want to be upfront that it is not settled fact. I'm telling you what was found, not what it proves, because at this point in the case, almost nothing is agreed upon. Here's the detail that a lot of people don't know or forget. There was never any sign of forced entry. No broken locks, no smashed windows, nothing. Whoever wrote that ransom note appears to have used a pad of paper and a pen that belonged to the Ramseys, sitting inside their own kitchen. And that ransom amount, $118,000, turned out to be almost exactly the amount of a bonus John Ramsey had received that year. Not a round kidnapper's number, a number that seemed to know something private about this specific family. So investigators, understandably, started looking hard at the parents. Handwriting analysts examined the note and reached different, inconclusive, and sometimes contradictory opinions about who wrote it. Some experts felt Patsy's handwriting had similarities, others disagreed, and no expert conclusively matched it to anyone in a way that held up as proof. Theories about staging circulated, the idea that an intentionally over-the-top ransom note and elaborate scene were meant to redirect attention. But, and this is important, a competing theory existed from the very start too, that an intruder got in some way investigators never fully reconstructed, killed JonBenét, and staged the note to buy time. Neither theory has ever been proven. I need to say that plainly because for years, tabloids treated the family did it theory as settled fact, and it was never that. In 1999, it was a theory. A Boulder grand jury actually voted to indict John and Patsy Ramsey, not for the murder itself, but for child abuse resulting in death, essentially for allegedly helping cover up how JonBenét died. And then the district attorney at the time declined to sign the indictment, saying there wasn't enough evidence to secure a conviction. That detail alone is wild to sit with. A grand jury wanted charges, and a DA overruled that instinct. It's rare. It happened here. For nearly a decade after that, the Ramseys lived under a cloud of public suspicion that, by most accounts, followed them everywhere. Patsy Ramsey died of ovarian cancer in 2006 without ever being cleared in the court of public opinion, even though she was never charged with anything. Then, in 2008, something happened that actually did shift the case. New, more advanced touch DNA testing was run on the long johns JonBenét had been wearing. It identified a male DNA profile, unknown, not matching anyone in the family, that hadn't been detectable with older testing methods. Based on that, the Boulder DA at the time formally and publicly cleared the entire immediate family, including Burke. It's one of the only unambiguous facts in the entire case, an official exoneration in writing. That same year, a man named John Mark Carr falsely confessed to the killing while living overseas. He was arrested, flown back to the US, and within days his DNA was tested and did not match the profile found on JonBenét's clothing. Charges were dropped. It turned out he wasn't even in Colorado at the time. So the case went cold. Genuinely cold. Not solved and quiet, cold, in the sense that nobody has ever been definitively tied to that unknown male DNA profile to this day. And this is the part I find almost as unsettling as the crime itself. It's still open. Boulder police reaffirm every December, around the anniversary, that it remains an active investigation. This past January, the department confirmed they'd conducted new interviews and retested pieces of evidence using newer forensic technology. Then this year brought a strange twist nobody saw coming. A former Colorado Bureau of Investigation forensic scientist who had worked there since the 1990s pleaded guilty in June to manipulating and falsifying data across hundreds of unrelated cases over nearly 2 decades. Investigators have said there's currently no evidence she tampered with anything in the Ramsey case specifically. Her documented misconduct is tied to a different window of years, but it understandably shook confidence in the lab that's handled this evidence. And John Ramsey, now in his 80s, has been publicly pushing for the remaining DNA to be sent to an independent lab for advanced genetic genealogy testing, the same kind of technique that's cracked other decades-old cold cases in recent years. He's still doing interviews, still asking, still, as of this year, waiting for someone to call the tip line. Where? That leaves us. Here's the thing I keep coming back to. Strip away the pageant photos, the tabloid decades, the docuseries, the endless internet theories, and what's actually left is a 6-year-old girl who never got to grow up, and a family, and a city that's been living inside an unanswered question for 30 years. We like true crime because it usually gives us an ending, a verdict, a name. This one doesn't. And I think that's exactly why it stayed with so many of us. Not because it's the goriest story or the strangest one, but because it's the one that refuses to close. Somewhere, there's a person who knows exactly what happened in that house, and 30 years later, they still haven't said a word.